Was was it get lost that you said, or a little bit more aggressive? Well, I mean, I think it's important for people to know that it was a little more assertive than get lost.
Welcome to 33 Tangents, a weekly podcast featuring a rotating panel of co-hosts that all work together in the same company but live in different areas of the world. The discussions cover a wide variety of topics from digital analytics to working remotely to current happenings in business and technology. Our regular day-to-day conversations often go off in various directions, and the goal of this podcast is to share our ideas and find new ways to engage with others.
Every other day at least, for 45 days straight, and then
What elliptical did you purchase?
I can't think of the name. But
enough.
we purchased it used a couple of years ago.
I really enjoyed the elliptical, but I made the mistake of, and this goes counter to my typical shopping habits, but I made the mistake of going a very low end Proform model.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with it, and I used it every day. And about 7 months in, it just like completely fell apart to the point I couldn't hold it together with duct tape. So it was disappointing.
Yeah. I remembered the name after I said I didn't, so I slacked it. It's an Octane Fitness Q35, but we bought it used for like $400. But it's like one of those like commercial.
Oh yeah, that's your big boy
versions.
That's your full size. That's your big boy. The route you get. Does anyone know the reference?
I don't. No. No reference.
Oh, that's the full size. Yeah, that's your big boy. It's Seinfeld when they're discussing the Entenmann's coffee cake, or is it Drake's coffee cake? I think it's Entenmann's. And I think it's when Jerry's neighbor was in the hospital in a coma.
Yeah.
And he's bartering with Newman, and he's like, I got the was it Drake's? Yeah, it was Drake's coffee cake. He's like, is that the full size? Yep, that's your big boy.
I think I remember that now.
I still don't remember it.
One of the things that I like to do, because I'm looking for some ways to use some of my spare time in a more creative endeavor, and I figure one of the best things I could do is watch end to end the entire lineup of Seinfeld episodes. Have we talked about this?
I don't think so. No.
Maybe Jim and I talked about it. It's both fascinating and has thrown me into a completely other world where everything is discombobulated. It's like I'm in Bizarro World. So Ben Gaines bought me the full box set of the DVDs of Seinfeld. You told
me that, yeah.
Wait, what's a DVD?
Yeah. For you kids out there, it's this metal disc.
We got the DVDs and the DVD player down here at the Best Buy.
It's a great box set. I love the pop-up version because you learn so many new facts. However, recently, due to a overwhelming of peer pressure from my children, I added Disney Plus to our streaming options.
Yep.
And also Hulu, which I did the Hulu, Disney Plus, ESPN package. And I found on Hulu the entire set of Seinfeld episodes.
Right. Yep.
Now here's where it gets interesting.
They're not right.
They're not quite right, Brian.
No. Yeah, they're like out of order, and
it's messing with my head. And I will tell you, this hit me, and I can't remember what season. Very early, one of the very early seasons. It's about 11:30 at night. I'm stretched out on the couch with a little 100-calorie pack of Pringles and a Fresca. And I'm just, I'm living the best life, watching some Seinfeld. And
was that an episode caffeinated Fresca or non-caffeinated?
Non-caffeinated,
Okay.
original.
Yeah.
Original. I didn't even know they made a caffeinated Fresca.
It's all caffeinated. It was a kind of a trick question.
It's not.
Okay.
I mean, you got to stay off of the Reddit forums, dude. Like, it's gone to like a whole other level of concerning at this point for me.
Shit. It isn't.
Okay.
It isn't caffeinated. It used to be. Like, I know this because
Not
as a
that I remember.
former practicing Mormon, I was, very aware of caffeine content in beverages.
Side story. We may never get to the content today,
That's fine.
by the way.
That's totally fine.
Side story, circa 1993. Now I have totally dated myself. I was
Wait, what year?
No,
What
1994.
Year?
1994.
Okay. 94, yep.
The location, Logan, Utah. I have to remember the name of the apartment complex I lived in. Evergreen something. It was right across from the Spectrum. The Fresca delivery truck broke down out in front of our apartment complex, and I had a couple of guys that I lived with that were auto mechanics and were big time into restoring cars. Went out and helped this guy get his truck running again, and he ended up giving us a couple of like not cases, but like big shrink wrap things of Fresca. So we were stocked up for a good few weeks. I mean, I've loved Fresca ever since then. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, Ruby Red Squirt has caffeine, and Squirt and Fresca are in the same citrusy blend. So maybe I was getting them mixed up. I'm just saying, here in Utah, the caffeine consumption is one of those magical things that is a topic of conversation. So there you go.
Completely understood. I'm gonna have to look this up while we're talking, because I can't remember the name of the apartment complex I lived in, and now it's gonna drive me crazy. But
so you guys got totally buzzed on Fresca.
Oh, we were so jacked up on Fresca. I mean, it's like no sugar, right? Or does it have sugar in it?
No, it's like
no. It's
no like
sugar.
A cancer-inducing sweetener that you consumed a lot of. Yeah.
Wait, where's the football stadium here? I'm on this application on the interwebs called Google Maps. There it is, Pineview Apartments. That's it, right across from the yellow parking lot at the Spectrum. Oh, good times at Pineview. Yeah, Pineview Apartments, Logan, Utah. You can Google Maps that and see out there on 1000 North is where the Fresca truck broke down. And man, what a good time. So back to the story. I'm watching this episode of Seinfeld, and George's dad, first time he appears in any episode, it's the episode where he works for the charity that gets wheelchairs for people, if you guys remember correctly. And so it's that episode. He walks in, and it is not George's dad. And I am freaking out. And I'm like, am I hallucinating? What is happening here? It wasn't Mr. Stiller, right?
It was like the first couple of seasons, or only the first season. He had a different actor, and it's terrifying to see that now.
It is terrifying.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I just badmouth Reddit. I get on Reddit, and I'm trying to figure out what is happening, and how is this happening. Come to find out, when they first shot and I think it may have been only one episode. When they shot this episode, they had a different guy cast as George's dad, and I have other ones, but I don't know if I should. Yeah, I'm not gonna. We can talk about some of the other episodes offline.
Jerry had a different dad too.
Jerry did have a different dad, but that is also on the DVD cut because it's sequential in episodes where Jerry's dad at one point changes. And I think it's a fantastic casting change, by the way, on Jerry's dad, because the actor that plays it for the bulk of the series was much better. Anyway, going back to George's dad, I go onto Reddit. I'm researching. They shot this episode with a different actor, and that's the episode that is on Hulu. So I started going deeper down this rabbit hole, understanding what is happening. And I come to find out that the series that Hulu purchased and streams is not necessarily what was broadcast on NBC. It's a different cut. And so that means that this was the most glaring thing that I saw, that this episode that they went back and reshot the scenes with George's new dad. Who is it? Jerry Stiller? What's his name?
Yeah, Jerry Stiller.
Yeah, Jerry Stiller.
Yeah, with Jerry Stiller. They went back and reshot it and spliced it in, and that's what we see on the NBC broadcast, and that's what's on the DVD set. But that isn't what Hulu bought the rights to. And not only that, some of the cut scenes are different, and some of the intro and outro scenes seem a little bit different to me. And one other fascinating fact, the NBC broadcast version, which is also on the DVD box set, was cropped for TV. The Hulu stream is 16:9 widescreen. So you get some stuff on the peripherals that never made it to broadcast.
That's crazy.
Because they did the opposite for The Simpsons for FX, which has now come over to Disney Plus with Disney acquiring Fox, where what they did was they took the TV cut and chopped off top and bottom to make it 16:9. And everybody is pissed because it cuts out a lot of sight gags.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like store shop names and signs and stuff that are in the background.
Just like little things underneath.
Yeah.
So it was funny. So, you're talking about this kind of stuff, and it reminds me of a couple exchanges yesterday that made me feel really, really old because
you are.
Yeah, whatever. I was on the phone with a client, and I made a reference to Spaceballs that no one got. And then I made a reference to Iron Butterflies in Inagata-Davida.
Iron Butterfly.
In the Garden of Eden by Iron Butterfly.
Iron.
So of course, I look up both the actual music video, but then also that Simpsons clip. And that's the thing. If you look at you look at the new version for what's on FX on TV and now Disney Plus, the way the clip goes, there's a little thing at the bottom that references the length of the song, and without that, you don't realize, it takes away from the gag.
Yeah,
interesting. I did not know that.
So other fun fact about Seinfeld: the slap bass that you hear, is not an actual bass. It's a guy on a keyboard with a synthesized bass sound and a little like keyboard whammy bar thing, pitch bender, and every one of the episodes. Anytime that you hear that, it is improvised for every episode.
Do you know that? Do you know that because you saw that on Dr. Mix?
I don't know if I saw that on Dr.
He does do this. I don't know if he has a whole episode on Seinfeld.
I don't think I saw it on Dr. Mix. It was some other like random thing that I found at one point in my life of random knowledge and facts. But yeah, it's actually fascinating because they show the guy, and what he would do is he would watch the clip of where the scene was going to start, and he would actually make a melodic track based on like the emotions he felt about that humor. And so it's all improvised to somewhat match kind of the pattern and the way that the words and the tones of the speaking that happens as well. So kind of, but yeah, like it's not an actual bass though. And he does a phenomenal job making it sound like an actual bass getting like,
Interesting. I will, I swear I saw something on Dr. Mix about that. I'll see if I can find it. But you know why that is also interesting? Because do you know what the folk story is behind the Seinfeld theme song, specifically the slap bass?
No.
That it was composed and played by none other than Mr. Les Claypool, which I don't believe is true at all.
No.
But that was a long held belief that Les Claypool was playing that. But according to the Reddit, it's a Jonathan Wolf that played it on the synth, right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This is so much more interesting than analytics.
You reminded me of Dr. Mix though, and I haven't watched anything from him for a while. He's one of the most entertaining
He really is.
YouTube personalities like that I've ever come across, and you
Did you?
introduced me to him. So
I was going to ask. Did you tell me
yeah.
about him, or did I tell you to go check? I
You
think
told me about him. It was the Take on Me recreation that he did that you sent to me, and it got me hooked.
so good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. I really enjoy his content. I was watching something. I'm trying to think of. Oh, the Knight Rider theme song. And I think he has a multi-part episode about recreating the Knight Rider theme song. And it's like, it's over an hour of content, and I'm like, why can I not stop watching this? It is so fascinating. Jim's like, what are you guys talking about?
No, it was so it got me like more amped up to like start playing the piano than a lot of things do. And I actually ended up buying like a 55 key MIDI keyboard.
Oh, did you?
That, yeah, I've got in here.
Jim, are you okay with this? I mean, we're just kind of riffing here.
Yeah. It's even got like the drum pads up there. So
I can't hear you, Jim.
yeah. It's okay. Jim doesn't need to talk. He's
He was purposely on mute.
yeah, it's okay.
I was on mute. I was gonna say, you know what, go for it, because you've given me my segue into our actual content when we're ready to get into it.
Yeah. All right. Well, just
I thought we
before
were recording. You've been recording for a while, so I figured you're going to use all of the content at some point. You know.
before we leave that topic, it's really interesting. The Dr. Mick stuff, seeing how he breaks down things and learning about all the different sounds. It's really fascinating to me. And one thing that I've noticed that he does a lot of 80s music recreation with his synthesizers, and all his equipment. And I have been hooked. I'm going to pull up my Sonos controller. I've been hooked on TuneIn's 80s Hits radio station for like 3 weeks now, and it's what I play in the office all the time. And now it seems like every song that comes up, I'm like, wait a minute, that's a sound that I've heard Dr. Mix recreate.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. Like Axel F from Beverly Hills Cop, he's done that.
That's a great episode, by the way.
Yeah, and now anytime I hear him, like I can hear every one of the instruments in those tracks now.
Yeah,
because the way he breaks it down and like recreates them.
Yeah.
And then the funniest thing to me is like, okay, let's mix it up. And it's like a 5-second, like sped up version of hours of him like actually doing the editing of the sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, good times.
Awesome. All right, Jim, go with your intro, pivot, segue.
Yeah. So, let's actually get into the actual content that people came here for. So for like the 3 listeners that haven't fired us yet, the topic I had today was a follow on from a previous episode that the 3 of us recorded. And one of the things we had mentioned toward the end was when to fire a client. So we've all worked for organizations where we've dealt with toxic clients. These are the clients that know that no matter what they do, what they demand, they'll be supported. But on the flip side, there's the concept of firing clients, and it's often floated about, but in many cases, it could be seen as rhetoric, and maybe a sales pitch that clients that don't meet our standards, we cut them off and yada yada yada. But a lot of times people don't necessarily follow through. So to get us started, when and why should you fire a client, and how can you tell the difference between a tough client and a client that needs to be fired?
Man, this conversation just took a dramatic turn.
Yeah, I'm not even smiling now.
Bryant was all happy, he's all serious face.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big conversation, and I will say, even before we get into that, one of the things that I have learned is that if it's a conversation that you're having a lot, the problem is most likely on you. And the reason I say that is that a lot of those conversations probably should be figured out before you even decide to do work together. And it's something that took me a while to figure out. And I think part of it is, especially when you're starting a new company, there's a lot of panic about just getting business in the door. And while I think we pride ourselves, especially early on, in sticking with our ideals when it came to the clients and the type of work that we chose to do, I don't think I had learned enough about how to properly evaluate fit through the sales process. At this point, 7 or so years in, I think I have definitely become much better at doing that. But I think it's important to call that out because, again, if it's a conversation that you're having consistently within your organization, I think it's more of an upstream problem than anything else, where you're accepting clients in that you probably shouldn't have in the first place. And that's really unfair to everybody.
Well, so with that, I mean, how would you? I mean, when to fire a client or when to sever ties with a partnership are symptoms. Like if you're at that point, there's underlying symptoms or underlying causes rather, and that's a symptom of a cause, somewhere else, right? So, like, can we categorize why that conversation would even come up? Is it a customer is upset because of failed expectations? Is it they're just a complete jerk and horrible to work with? Is it that they are like socially and professionally manipulative? Like I've dealt with clients that are that way, that play different members of teams against each other for the intent of their own personal or professional gain. Like are we dealing with personality or like actual issues with a contract or with the partnership? I think maybe we start there.
Yeah. And I think the answer is yes. But I think most importantly, the first thing to figure out is what are the expectations? Because oftentimes we don't have that open conversation about expectations, and it's where you have misset expectations in the relationship where it tends to break down very, very quickly. So being open and upfront about what you're trying to do, what they're trying to do, what the expectations are is critically important. And this goes for all kind of relationships. I think about it in the employer-employee relationship and how we often tend to fake that most important interaction through the job hiring process, where we kind of dress up and we have a tone of voice and a conversation, and we hide the things that, we put on this act so that we can get the job. And companies do the same thing, right? They put on an act to only show the good faiths and try to show, here's the fun things. I'm going to walk you around and show you our game room and our kick-ass cafeteria. And they're not open in what the expectations are and having those conversations. And oftentimes that's what leads to, after the honeymoon period, a very quick breakdown in the relationship because the expectations weren't clear up front. And so from that perspective, it's something that I have been very transparent and clear with the prospects that I talk to say, this is how we work. This is our model. This is our expectation for you. This is how I expect we will engage together. This is how I expect you to be an active participant in that project. What are your expectations? What do you want? And sometimes it's companies come back and say, to be honest with you, we're looking for a contractor that can come in and fill a hole. We already know what they want. We want them to do. We have a bunch of tasks for them to do. We're not asking them to think about it. We just need them to come in and do it. Great. That's not a good fit for us, right? Right. So getting those conversations out of the way very early is really, really important. And I think it's not something that people are used to, even on the sales side. Just think about the sales process. Again, it's, if you go back to the old school sleazy sales guy, it's whining and dining. And, it has nothing to do with having real conversations about here's what you're going to expect. And people are scared of that because people are going to get turned off and turned away. And that's absolutely right. And that's what you want, right? Through that process, you want to have that conversation so people self-select because it's going to end up better for them and it's going to end up better for you as well. I can't put a number on how costly it is to have the wrong client, but it's very high and it can be catastrophic if you don't get a handle on it very early. So it's the risk of not having that conversation is just massive. But I understand from a sales perspective, from someone trying to get someone to agree perspective, from a buyer perspective, it's a very uncomfortable place to be because it's just something that most people are not used to when they're evaluating a buy opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I've enjoyed since joining 33 Sticks is one of the major areas that caused contention with clients. And at 33 Sticks, we're divorced from any um, formal partnership with a vendor or a specific tool. Whereas my previous role at Adobe, having to be a service arm for a vendor provided all sorts of additional complexities that most service organizations don't have to deal with. And that is that in addition to a service contract that we need to maximize revenue and profit from, there is also the vendor relationship. And those two sales teams often were different and didn't have a lot of open communication. And so expectations could and often were set that were unattainable by one team about the other. And that oftentimes, and that's why I brought up the point earlier around, is it failed expectations that make a client act a certain way, or is it just the client actually being like a sociopath? And in a lot of cases, while at Adobe, clients were promised things outside of technological capability, and we were a service arm in which we were supposed to just make it happen at all costs. And so that created a lot of dynamics that really hindered making strong relationships with clients and put everybody under a high stress. But to the point that you're making around doing that screening up front, I think we can say a lot of things here that you've created this culture here that is intentionally different and divorced from those things that a lot of organizations are unable to do so. So how do we address that for someone that's in a situation where they're completely downstream and dealing with that client that probably should be fired, but they can't be because there's $5 million of revenue or licensing on the line, and their service contract is worth 50 grand, and nobody really cares about that, so they don't really care how they're treating you as a consultant or as a consulting manager or a director over consulting, because you're nothing when it comes to the amount of revenue that client is actually worth to the company.
I'm glad you brought it up. I don't know if there's an easy answer for that, because I think that's something we've all faced, and even back in the early days at Omniture, we faced something similar. There's a lot of pressure on the sales team to make sales. They made commitments and promises that they couldn't fulfill and were very difficult for us to fulfill, and it made us the bad guy, unfortunately. I don't know how to solve that problem, and I don't know really where the problem lies. I think it's multifaceted. I think it's definitely an upper management problem of setting proper priorities that are consistent across the organization. I definitely think it's a Wall Street problem, where we have companies that are living quarter to quarter based on financial results that win the day. And so oftentimes sales tactics get prioritized above everything else. And whatever it takes to make the deal this quarter trumps everything else, unfortunately. And what that means is oftentimes, people like you, Brian, at Adobe, and I don't want to pick on Adobe because it happens in almost every company with a software services component. Promises get made that make your job as a services manager, someone that's executing on the services side, an uphill battle. And the way that we kind of talked about it in the early days at Omniture, we said that we're coming in at like a -8 or -9, and we're going to feel good if we can crawl our way up to 0, let alone being positive with the customer, because we were put in such a deep hole because sales was doing what they could do to make the sale. I do think there are companies that are flipping that paradigm for sure, that have more consistency and looking at having shared goals. But money, man, is a massive driver, and whether it's Wall Street driving quarterly results or the sales guy wanting to add another zero to his paycheck, that's often going to push the needle more than trying to have a more sane conversation about what's the best thing for the company and the client long term.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think, vendors have that complexity that doesn't exist. But I see it also with small agencies or even medium-sized agencies that to get that brand, like we've got to have this brand in the lifestyle space so that we can put it on our logo and say we partner with so and so, and they're willing to sacrifice their corporate culture to get that logo to help further it. It's that thirst for growth, and I think the way that I've kind of posed a lot of challenges in this discussion so far, and maybe now I'll switch to kind of sharing my opinion on certain things. But I think as a former manager of a large organization, I found it extremely troubling that more conversations were had about how to deal with challenging clients than opposed to how to actually help my team members grow and how to help them benefit from growth. And I feel if you're in that position where you're either having more conversations with your manager about, hey, this client's really challenging, not because the work is hard or I'm having to learn something, but because they're just not easy to work with and they're not getting that support. Or if you're a manager and you're dealing with so many clients that you're kind of up against the wall around like it just not being a healthy partnership, you need to make that decision for whether or not you're going to have massive amounts of turnover in your employees, because is that cost worth it to train up new talent and bring them on with your clients, and potentially have them spin out a year out from now, versus divorcing from that particular brand, that unicorn brand that's going to help you get all sorts of recognition in the industry. And it's a hard one to make, but you have to make that decision. Are you about your people and your clients? Are you about just your clients? Are you about the growth and what you're trying to do with your business? And it's one of the things that I've come, and I'm not just saying this because Jason, you're on the line, but it's been a real change for me in working in a place that values the relationships regardless of client brand or logo we work with beyond anything else. And it's been eye-opening.
Yeah, and I think it is such an important conversation to have it, because I think it's also about where you put your vision. And the reality is that everything we do is a lot more than just the opening attack. And so often we put way too much emphasis on, again, that short-term gain without thinking about, well, what does this mean for future possibilities and sustainability? We rarely do that. And this episode, I think, is going to out me as having a serious YouTube addiction. But I'm okay with that. I don't want to say how many hours a week, because I watched a 5-hour tournament the other day. I'm really into chess, watching chess on YouTube. And there's a guy that breaks down historical chess games. In about 15 to 20 minute long episodes, we'll break down a game. And it's fascinating to me. I'm probably like the world's worst chess player, but I'm fascinated watching it. Anyway, in chess, there's the concept of the poisoned pawn. And it reminds me a lot about what you're talking about, Bryant, of, well, we just have to get this logo. But oftentimes that logo is a poisoned pawn. And what that means is that in the opening moves in a chess game, oftentimes there's a trap that players will play where they put a pawn out there that can be taken. It looks so seductive. We just have to have this pawn. But if you take it, it's a losing move. It puts you in a position where you're going to lose material, and ultimately you're going to lose the game because you took that pawn. And then I think we're faced with that poison pawn a lot in business, whether it's adding a specific logo or it's making a decision because we need this specific deal to get done this quarter at this time. Oftentimes it's poisoned, and it looks really seductive when we take it, but we get to the middle and the end game and we see that was a horrible horrible mistake to put us in a losing position long term.
So are these companies that are going quarter to quarter, are they just functionally unable to see the middle and end game because every quarter goes by so quickly that they're always picking the poisoned pawn, so to speak?
I think that's true of most companies for sure. Yeah, I think once companies get to a certain size, it's too difficult to sustain their model other than just thinking quarter to quarter. And I'm sure people will come back and say that they have examples of companies that don't, and I'm sure there are. I mean, Jim knows the company that I'm going to throw out that does, right? Maybe not.
I think so.
So I would throw out Patagonia as a company that definitely thinks about the future more than just this next move. But I think for most companies, it's hard, and I don't know what the largest company you guys have been a part of. I think the largest company I've ever been a part of was about 18,000 employees, and I saw how difficult it was at just that scale, which I think is still considered a fairly small company, right? At 18,000 employees.
Yeah, it's small to mid-sized.
How difficult it was for a company of that size to think anything other than just a few days out, right? Like it was very, very difficult to move a company of that size. So maybe that's just the reality of getting to that size. And I want to be careful about how I kind of paint that picture, because it's a much different world, our size of company, right? Like we can make decisions and pivots really, really quickly. It's not fair to say that would work at scale. With that said, I still think that the lessons are still the same. And, taking a poison pawn is taking a poison pawn. And, a company that has $1 billion in the bank, you may not see the impacts of it because they have a bit more. We missed you. We missed you on a previous episode, Bryant, because I was throwing out all sorts of corporate cliches. But they have a bit more runway, if you will.
They're laying down the track in front of the train.
Yeah. I hadn't heard that one, but sure.
Yeah.
but to your point, and I think there is legitimacy in saying that, once a company gets to a large enough size, it becomes much, much harder. So, I mean, I think that that goes to what we've talked about for the last several years in finding ways to scale, so we don't fall into that pattern of the only way we can support new clients is to grow by adding people, right? So we get, so we prevent ourselves, so we stay small, we stay lean, and prevent ourselves from growing to a size where it becomes harder to do that.
Are you trying to goat me into getting into a discussion about billable hours versus non-billable hours?
Potentially.
Because I think that decision is often driven by the model, right? When you handcuffed yourself that the only growth that you can do is by adding more people so you can add more hours, it's kind of a losing in game. But I think that's a conversation for a different episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about the billing model.
It's a fun conversation, though. I mean,
yeah. But no, it just as you were talking, it made me think about a lot of what we've talked about, internally, just you and I, and finding ways so we can stay small, so we can be much more flexible and make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, for sure. I do want to go back to the start when you kind of laid out or maybe it was Bryant that mentioned, what is it? Is it a personality thing? Is it a contractual thing? Because I do think that there's a personality component to it. And I think it's an important conversation to have as well, in that personalities come and go. So I think it's important to pull apart, is it this person or is it the culture of the company that's coming through in that personality? If you have cultural differences, it probably is a good idea to walk away from that deal up front. But that's a tougher thing to kind of tease out when you're just figuring out a relationship. But I wouldn't default to say that it's either one side or the other, that if you run into a difficult personality, that it's this person versus this company culture. I will say that I have been getting better at recognizing that. I told a very, 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 and they let me know how very, 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 very large they are and how people don't say no to them brand to get lost. Because during the procurement process,
was it get lost that you said, or a little bit more aggressive?
I'm trying to keep our non-E rating on the podcast.
Well, I mean, I think it's important for people to know that it was a little more assertive than get lost.
It was a bit more assertive. And to your point, it would have been a really, really sexy logo to have on our site. It would have been a brand to add to our NASCAR slide, if you will. But during the procurement process, they showed a very, very abusive side, very abusive. And it was not just one person. And it was very easy for me to see that this was a part of their company culture. And it was very easy for me to say that this is our poison pond, that if I were to take this, it would have put us in a very, very bad situation, in which I would expose you guys to working in a very, very toxic environment. So I definitely think there are cultural issues. With that said, I think there are challenging personalities as well. And I don't necessarily think that a challenging personality should be grounds for firing a client, at least not immediately. Totally. Because, a lot of times our job and why we're in there is to help make people better. And sometimes it's helping people understand that there's a different way that they can go about their job, and kind of throwing our hands up and saying, this is a tough personality to work with, isn't doing us any favors, and honestly isn't doing the company and the person that we're working with any favors. So I know it's challenging, but I would say, probably the majority of the people we work with are challenging in a way. And I would say we're probably challenging in a way. And that's okay, as long as we have a shared goal and vision that we're trying to get to, and it's a team effort that we're trying to get there. I think people have a vision that just because you're teammates, you always get along and hang out with each other and like each other as best friends all the time. And it's not true, right? Like you have difficult times and good times, and it's the same in our relationships with customers, because it's a real relationship. There are going to be challenging times and better times, and I think that that's okay. And we really owe it to everybody involved in that to work through those scenarios. If there is.
Sorry. Okay. 'Cause I have a funny story about, personality. So when you're done, I do want to jump
I was just gonna finish with, if there really is a challenging personality and it's creating a very toxic relationship, it should be addressed. It shouldn't just be brushed under the rug. It shouldn't be, we're going to have really tough internal conversations and bitch about that personality, but then not have that conversation with the person. We need to, respect the relationship and have some tough conversations and put all of us in the best position to succeed. But again, I don't think a tough personality is an immediate cause for firing a client by any means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you got to ask yourself too, why are they a tough client? Because as you mentioned, we're brought into, the analogy I've heard before is, we're not hired because everything's going well. Like we're a triage center or a triage unit to, emergency victims, so to speak, in a lot of cases. Like there's something really bad going on, and we're trying to help them figure it out. So oftentimes they're pretty high stress situations on the client end. They're in that situation where it's a quarter to quarter culture, and they've got a lot of pressure. So if they're being difficult because they've got stress, then how do you help that? How do you become the release valve for that stress and provide them ways to show value for themselves so that pressure lessens on their load? And it goes back to one of the things that I've been doing since joining here, which is really building that personal relationship with the individual that I work with, regardless of who they are and what their title is or where they're at. Because once you have that personal connection to them, it becomes much less frequent that it's us versus them. It's a we situation in which we're working together to better their program or better their analytics deployment or their testing and optimization program. And they see me as that partner and not as a threat or not as somebody that is looking to change things for the sake of changing them. That relationship is critical.
Yeah, no, it's such a strong point, and I think it's important for people to take a minute and think through that, because whether you're in professional services or you're providing services internally in your company, you're in that position because you're filling a need that isn't there otherwise. And I think Jim and I have had the conversation. Companies aren't hiring us just because we're like super fun to hang out with, which I mean, true,
Which
we are.
we are.
They're hiring us because there's a problem, and we're there to fix it. And I think about it on, with the shoe on the other foot. I think if we just fired clients because of that, I'm wondering who would fire me. I'm sure my accountant would have fired me a long time ago, because every time I'm calling him up, it's because I'm freaking out. I'm panicking about something and I need him to like talk me through it and fix something. And so I'm not usually calling him up saying, "Hey, so did you see the Bears play the other night?" Something. I was trying to come up with a Ferris Bueller reference.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It's 0-0. Who's winning? The Bears. So anyway, I think it's an important reminder that when you work in services, that oftentimes, it is a challenging situation, because you're not, that's why you're being brought in. You're not being brought in because you're fun to hang out with. You're being brought in because there's a challenge, and you're the person that they believe can help solve that problem. All right, Jim, go with your story.
Yeah, so I've got a funny story when it comes to like managing difficult personalities. This is going back 8-9 years. We're re-implementing analytics for a large retailer, and the main contact on the client side is notorious throughout our company as just being someone difficult to work with. And he and I, we just clicked. We got along really, really well. We had a great working relationship, so much so that when we started UAT, the UAT environment was running like crap. Like we actually sat there and timed it where it took like 5 minutes just to run one on-site search, and we had a few hundred test cases to get through. So I would normally do UAT alongside the client with them to make sure everything is working good. We get on the phone with the project manager who's on another team, for the company that I'm working for. The client, me, I'm on there, a couple other people, and he just rips everybody on the phone, a new one. Just tears everybody apart like this is unacceptable, yada, yada, yada. You got to fix it. Get this taken care of. The project's at risk. Like, just tears into everybody. I no sooner hang up the phone and I get a call from his number. So I pick it up. It's, "Hey, Jim, it's Dave. I just want you to know I kind of had to light everybody up there, but I wasn't directing it toward you. I just kind of needed to go after everyone." I'm like, "No, I got you, David. It's fine." And then a few other people on like the tech account side for the client were just like, "How do you get along with him? How do you work with him?" Like, honestly, I give him the time of day. You guys see him as secondary when he's being asked by his senior management to report on the health of the business. You're not giving him the time of day. He's not getting what he needs. You put his request as secondary or even third level on the list. That's what I'm doing. That's what makes him easy to work with. Is do I bend over backwards for him? I wouldn't say I would. I just answer the phone, and I answer his emails and give him an honest answer on where something's at, and he respects you for it.
Treat people with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Be empathetic to the position they're in, and ultimately, I think that typically wins the day. I think back to this client, never a client, but prospect I had to let go. all it would have taken was a little bit of empathy, instead of trying to be, I'm the big bad guy, like no one says no to us, and things could have been completely different for everybody. But such is life. But it's a good takeaway. It's better.
Yeah.
It's okay to be nice, and understanding. That tends to get you far.
And you know what? When you're able to do that, when things do get tough, when you do, here's another cliche, get in the trenches in the middle of a project, it makes those difficult periods of a project, of an implementation, run so much smoother, or at least helps you get through it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Good.
Yeah,
good
and
episode.
always take a minute to, just to think about it. Step away from it. If you're like, I've been in some heated client conversations.
Bryant's talking to me, telling me to cool down.
No, I'm not talking to you right now. But no, if I've been consulting for over 15 years, there's been a number of times in which there's been those conversations that it's an hour long, but it feels like 10 years of your life, because of the tension or tone or both involved there. And in those particular days or moments, if you can, and you should try and make it a way to be able to cancel the rest of the day and go on a drive or go on a walk and think about it, or get away from it, so take every opportunity to take the time to think through things and make those relationships valuable, where you can.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap it up. It's been a awesome conversation.
Yeah, it's been a real fun one.
Even though we took the first 15 minutes to talk about Seinfeld and YouTube, and I don't know how much you're going to cut out, but that was some good stuff too.
No, I'm keeping it all in.
All right.
Cool, guys. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll catch everybody later.
See ya.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of 33 Tangents. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast aggregator so others can find us. If you would like to reach us, you can do so by emailing podcast@33sticks.com or on the web at 33tangents.33sticks.com. 33 Tangents is a production of 33 Sticks, an analytics boutique.